gonna tell you something. I'll tell you a story. I live in Atlanta, and it's hard out here right now. Job market is crazy. People are looking for jobs and they're struggling. And had a friend, couldn't find a job, came to me, said, Lecrae, look, it's hard out here, I'm struggling, you got any suggestions? I said, I really don't. I can't tell you what to do. He's like, all right, it's cool. I found a lead anyway, I'm gonna just check that out and see how it works. I said, oh, word, what you find? He said, well, if I'm gonna be honest with you, I found a lead at the zoo. I said, okay, but you went to school for economics, so I'm like, is this working in like the money department, or like how's this working? It's like, nah, it's not in the money department, but you gotta start somewhere. I said, okay, cool. Well, what is it? He said, well, listen. I went in there and they said they're having some problems with the apes. The apes are not functioning right, they're sick, and they're not doing what they need to do. So they want me to dress up in an ape costume and get in there and dance around to keep the momentum going and keep the kids happy. I said, you lying? He said, no, I'm dead serious. I said, you went to school for economics and now you're gonna dance like a monkey for a living. He's like, times are hard. So he puts on his ape costume, he goes to work, he gets to swinging and jumping and doing what monkeys do. But he got a little too into it. Got a little too into the job, thought he was a monkey one day, swung himself from a branch right over into the lion's den. Now, he's sitting in his lion's den, realizes where he's at, sees a lion, starts screaming, help! In full monkey garb. Help me! All the kids are confused. And then the lion comes running at him. He says, no! And the lion says, man, if you don't shut up, we both gonna lose our jobs, man. That's not a true story. But it helps make my point about the gospel. That things are not always as they seem. And you can take the gospel for granted. You can think you know what you're looking at, but it could be something so much more than you and I even understand. And so Paul talks about this gospel. It's this gospel that's the life of God. You know Paul, Apostle Paul, my man, your man in the scriptures. Paul says this, he says, I gave you birth through the gospel. Right after that, he says, the gospel is continuing to give us new life even after we become Christians. So the gospel is the power that enables us to grow and have a fruitful life as Christians. Colossians 1:6 kind of unpacks this. Right? So after being a Christian for years, I still need the gospel. Like I still need it. Right? I need a power outside of myself to be more godly. Because it is not natural for me to do things that are godly. Right? I can share my lunch with you. I can act like I love you. But it is not natural for me to give you my fruit snacks. I love fruit snacks, and it's got to be a power outside of myself to get me to share those with you. I need the gospel. Right? I need this gospel. When I don't feel like reading or praying or loving people, it takes a faith in this gospel to change my heart and give me a desire for God. So this gospel is living, right? The Bible says it's living. It's a seed of a plant that brings more and more life-bearing fruit in our lives. It grows in us, right? The gospel's at work in us. It's conforming us into the image of God. It's helping us stay in line with God's charge. Paul challenges people. He says, you guys are not keeping in step with the gospel. Saying that's like you've been changed and this is how you're supposed to be living. Right? The gospel's not contrary to popular belief. It's not just the doorway into Christianity. It's the whole house. Does that make sense? It's not the ticket price. It's not like the admission into the movie theater. It's the ticket, it's the $35 popcorn, it's the movie, and it's your ride home. Like it's all of that. It encompasses it all. And so a lot of Christians think the gospel is only for non-believers, and that is true. Right? We do need the gospel to get saved, but after we become Christians and are saved, we don't grow by hard work and obedience. That's not how we grow. Most of us think, well, now you're saved, the only way you're going to grow is through hard work and obedience. No. the Bible says something very contrary. Colossians 1:6 again clears this up. It says the gospel is bearing fruit in you. The gospel is the only reason why you're growing and becoming more mature. Right? Like the gospel saved us. I used to trip on this word saved because I never understood what it meant. Like saved. Like what does saved mean? You know what I mean? I remember being a little kid, and when I think of saved, like you saved, like, hey, save me some ice cream, or I saved some money by switching to Geico. Or if I'm playing a video game, I save the game so my mama won't beat my frame. She's like, hey, you better save that game and get downstairs and clean this room. I'm just joking, my mama didn't beat me. She just loved me real hard and left a mark sometimes. But I didn't know what saved meant. Right? And I would say that a lot of us don't quite understand the concept of what the gospel saves us from. I remember being 17 years old, and I didn't come to stuff like this. I wish I did. At 17, I had done so much foolishness, got myself in so much trouble, was addicted to pornography, sex, on drugs, all kinds of craziness, that my life went in a downward spiral. And I was about to turn 18 years old, and I thought to myself, I need help. So let me just go to church. So I wandered into a church. I thought it was an adult thing to do. You know, my grandmother went to church, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go to church. So I go to church on Sunday, and you know, it was a small church, little bitty church, and of course, pastors always like to make the new people feel uncomfortable. Tell you to stand up if you're new. Pastor, stop doing this, it's embarrassing. Okay, you're embarrassing us. So I stood up. But see, it wasn't enough for that day. It wasn't, me standing up saying hello, that wasn't enough. An older lady who was sitting in the crowd hawked her eyes on me, saw me like prey. And it took her about 0.28 seconds to run up on me and say, young man, are you saved? She zoned in on me, man. And I was like, why me? Now I was a 6'4", really young dude who stood out like a cheeseburger at Chick-fil-A. But she still ran up on me. She's like, are you saved? And I really had no idea what she was talking about. I was like, saved? Saved from what? Somebody chasing me? What I need to be saved from? So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, and I was like trying to ponder. I'm racking my little 17 years of wisdom, and I'm thinking through this. Am I saved? Am I saved? Come on, Lecrae, what does she mean? And finally I remember, okay, my grandmother uses this term sometimes. I think grandma's saved, so she wants to know, am I like my grandmother? I get it. She wants to know if I'm old. Do I keep a pocket full of peppermints? Is my week filled up with revivals and bingo? And I, at that moment, told her, no, ma'am, I'm not saved. Now the look of disgust on her face will never leave me to this day. I thought my breath was stinking. Because she was like, and I was like, I didn't know what the problem was. I had no clue. And she was honestly just deeply concerned at my reply. She was so concerned that it bothered me, and I didn't even come to grips with what it was she was saying until 2 years later. I had no concept of what I needed to be saved from. Had no concept of what this gospel was. This gospel was good news that God saves people. But saves us from what? Right? What do we need to be saved from? Right? Why do any of us need salvation? Well, you got to go to the Bible for that. And I want you to know the Bible is a love letter. It's God articulating himself to us, allowing us to know him, his nature, and his decrees, his thoughts, his mind, and his heart. And when you get into the Bible, there's a specific book that I think explains what salvation is. It's the book of Romans, one of my favorite books. And so you look at Romans from the wider context, and Paul is always speaking about salvation. And he tells us why we need to be saved in Romans 1:18. Right, funny story real quick about Romans 1:18. Romans 1:18, right? I always say Romans 1:16 because that's like my favorite verse, right? 1:16, as we represent that, it says, I'm unashamed of the gospel. It's the power of God for salvation for all who believe. If you see any of us saying 1:16 or chanting that or anything, it just means Romans 1:16. Now, I usually sign autographs and I say, hey, the Lecrae 1:16 or 1:16. But one day I messed up, forgot what I was doing, and wrote 1:18 on this little boy's autograph. And I was like, oh shoot, I wrote 118 on this boy's autograph. Let me go look in the Bible and see what the heck I just told him. So I looked at Romans 1:18, and it says, the wrath of God abides on all unrighteousness and those who suppress the truth. Little boy, wherever you are, I'm sorry, man. If you're scared in a corner somewhere, I apologize, bro. But truthfully, though, that's what we need to be saved from. The wrath of God abides on all those who are unrighteous and suppress the truth. That's what Romans 1:18 says. It says because of God's wrath, he's angry at our unrighteousness and how we suppress the truth. That God is mad at our sin, our unrighteousness, and our suppressing of truth. Right? He's mad at that. Right? You flip over to Romans chapter 2. In chapter 2, verse 5, it says pretty much the same thing. Chapter 2, verse 8, the same thing. That God's wrath abides on unrighteousness. That wrath and fury will be coming, right? Righteous judgment is coming. Now, a lot of people say, that's not my God, Lecrae. My God is not a mean God. That's not what the Bible says. We got to believe what the Bible says about God. And see, you got to understand something too. When it says that God is angry, it's not angry like you and me get angry. It's not angry like Uncle Jethro who had too many beers at the family barbecue. It's not that type of anger. Right? Like God, his anger is righteous. Our anger is terrible. God tells us to be slow to be angry. Right? He says, be angry and do not sin. Why does he say this? Because he knows we're not good enough to get mad. Right? We can't handle anger. But he's bringing a day of wrath and anger, and it's going to be shown in part now, but more out in the future, like Romans 1:18 is talking about. There's a day that's coming, anger and his wrath when God's so potent, people will literally ask to be crushed and killed rather than face him. They will literally say, God, just kill me. I don't want to face God. Just kill me. Right? This is the kind of wrath that Romans is bringing up. This is what we need to be saved from, according to Romans. This is why we need to be saved. And so many would tell you, many would say, well, no, Lecrae, I just think we need to be saved from guilt and saved from depression and saved from hatred and broken relationships and saved from, calamity and even saved from our sin. And that's true. But mainly we need to be saved from the wrath of God. It's coming. So when you look at Romans 1:16, it says, 1:16 says, the gospel is the power of God to save us from what? From the wrath of God. God's wrath is so potent and powerful, only the power of God can save us from the wrath of God. We need a power greater than we can understand or we can possess to save us from God. So basically what the gospel is saying is it's the good news that God rescues sinners from God. Right? It's not like Satan is like chilling and saying, yo, hell is mine. I'm waiting on y'all. Hell is a punishment for Satan too. He doesn't run that place. God does. God runs it, and so God is saying, you need to be saved from my wrath, not Satan's. I got something for him too. And so the gospel is the power of God to save us from God. Romans 5:9 says that we shall be saved. Wait, I thought we were saved, right? I went to the altar call. I say that. I believe. I confess my sins. I'm saved, right? I thought that's it, right? Isn't that it? Well, true, you're saved. But you're saved, you are being saved, and you will be saved, right? You are saved from that wrath presently, but you will still need to be saved from that wrath in the future tense as well. Doesn't mean you got to do something to get yourself saved. It doesn't mean it's on you. It just means that wrath is still coming, and we all need to be saved from it.